Welcome to another edition of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course. If you're here at the Peaceful Solution headquarters and you're watching online, you can be seated. And if this is your first time tuning in, you can go to the top of the Facebook page, the official Peaceful Solution there, and click on the drop-down menu where it says download the manual. You'll see a list of manuals. We are on the third manual. It's the self-control manual of the Peaceful Solution. And we are going to be, we're covering chapter 4. And we give you the title here. It's called Applying Self-Control to Interaction and Communication. It's found on page 89, but we're, the last time that I did class, we left off on page 99. Which is poor communication could lead to disrespect. And as we always do in the Peaceful Solution, we got to go back a little bit and just review quickly what it is we covered last class. And before we even do that, what I'd like to do is go back to the LP4D and look at the step that we're on, step number 6. Step number 6, and I'll go ahead and read that again. To refresh our memory, what we're doing is we're explaining to students that learning to actively listen not only requires stopping to consider the speaker's words, but also facial expressions and body language, which we'll cover a little bit just to kind of recap or review. Listening for facts and the feelings behind the facts will lessen the opportunity for misunderstandings. And it says, have students read the section entitled Listening Also Requires Self-Control, found on page 93, which we've done. Have students pay close attention to the section Tips for Active Listening, found on page 95, which we have done. And instruct them to complete the exercises on page 96 and 97 and discuss answers with the class. Okay? And we have not done that yet, but what I'd like to review tonight, if you'd go over to page 93. Actually, go over to page 90. Page 90. Just to remind ourselves, what is communication? At the top it says, to communicate means to convey, that means to carry, or transmit knowledge, information, thoughts, or feelings in a way that is satisfactorily received or understood. And then we also learned that in the second paragraph, where it says under the heading, did you hear what I just said? It says, for communication to be successful, there has to be a speaker or a listener. One must give information, and the other must be willing and able to receive the information. You know, and that means there has to be a speaker, and the person that's receiving this information has to be willing and able. In other words, they have to be, they might speak another language, and they might be willing to accept the information, but they're not able because they can't understand you. Or they're very disobedient, proud and arrogant, and they're lacking that positive character trait of being humble, so they might not be willing to accept the correction or the instruction you're given with a positive attitude, so they refuse to even listen to you. So they're not willing to listen or willing to receive the instruction or information. We also learned, let's turn over to page 92. We learned that, we put a lot of emphasis on the words that we speak when we think of communication, but the words, as we see here, are only constitute 7% of communication. Most of what people are checking out when they communicate with us is our facial expressions and our tone of voice. Okay, 55% of communication is based on those facial expressions, and 38% is based on tone of voice. Okay, we learned also on page 95 or 93. I'm sorry. An important part of communication is listening, okay? And remember, the speaker and the listener both have to be applying self-control. Self-control when listening means to make sure through active listening that you're not only hearing what's being said, but that you also understand the intent behind the words. In other words, you're trying to comprehend what the person is saying and feeling. Very important. You really need to underline that so you can understand what the definition of active listening is. Learning to be an active listener will help you solve problems and disagreements because it opens the door to communicating in a way that's respectful and caring. And remember, everybody wants to be heard, they want to be understood, but sometimes they lack the communication skills, right? They don't really know how to ask for what they want or tell you what they want. They try to beat around the bush and they expect you to figure it out. Well, if you're an active listener, you can figure it out, but you've got to be able to, watch not just with your ear or not hear not just with your ears, but watch with your eyes and listen with your heart at the same time. Okay, so let's look at page 94. Remember, we learned that at the top that another aspect of active listening is empathy. And that empathy means to be able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and feel what they might be experiencing, And that's where we learned about, well, if somebody says that they hate English, if they tell you they hate English, are they really hating English, or what is it that they're really trying to tell you? Well, put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel if you weren't doing very well in English? Okay, well, you'd probably feel frustrated because you're having a hard time. So it gives us an active listening, examples of responses that show we're listening. We could say, boy, it sounds like you're really frustrated. Or, I can tell you're having a hard time in English class. Those are called door openers. Both of those are appropriate, and they would be showing care and concern for whatever our friend is going through. It would show that we're actually listening to what they're saying. And on the bottom of page 94, it says, take the time to listen to others no matter how much you want to speak. This shows self-control. As I said last class, I think all of us can agree, a lot of times when we're listening to people, there's a tendency to not really, we're already formulating in our mind what we want to say. We're being very impatient in our mind, and we're thinking and formulating what we want to say rather than really listening to what the person's thoughts are. We're not really caring so much about their thoughts as we're caring about how to respond. And we've got to learn how to practice self-control in that area. I'm sure all of us do. So look on page 95. It says tips for active listening. That's where we left off. It says the following tips will help you acquire the skills of an active listener. It says reflect what the speaker is feeling. And remember, we just went over that. That's called empathy. This can be done by using statements such as, it sounds like, it seems like, could it be that you are? For example, okay, well, let me just look at the first graphic that we have here tonight. These are called reflective responses. What you're doing is you're reflecting back to the speaker what you think they're feeling. Like, remember, you're using empathy. You're putting yourself in their shoes. And you're reflecting back to them like a mirror. You're helping them see what they're really feeling. Or you're fishing for what they're really feeling. Okay? And you're responding and reflecting back to them what you think they're going through so they can understand that, hey, this person really is listening to me. They really care about what I'm saying. Not only did they hear what I say, but they understand how I feel. And that's very important to people. Okay, so it says, it gives the example. It says, for example, Susie is upset. Her eyebrows knit together and she's frowning. Susie yells, she makes me so mad. An active listening response would say, hey, dummy, no one makes you angry. Is that what it says? No, that's not actively listening, That would not be, would that help her if you responded that way? Would that help her solve the problem the emotion she's going through at that time? Would that show that you really care? No, of course not. So let me start again. Susie yells, "She makes me so mad." An active listening response would begin with, "It sounds like you're really angry with her." Notice that Susie didn't say she was angry, but her facial expression, tone of voice, and her words say very plainly that she is angry. Okay, now, but wait a minute. Wait a minute. This seems to be a contradiction here, because she did say she was mad, right? And you told her, "You sure sounds like you're really angry." Yeah, but she didn't say she was angry. She said she was mad. Isn't that the same thing? Let's find out. Let's go to the next graphic. We need to look at the definition of the word mad, okay? Mad, the first definition means arising from, indicative of, or marked by mental disorder. That means that the mind isn't functioning properly. It's not, another word for mad, what people would say would be like crazy, okay? Number two, completely unrestrained by reason and judgment. That means totally out of control, okay? Totally out of control, no restraint in their reasoning and their judgment. Now, I want you to think about the definition of the word angry. Didn't we already say in previous classes, didn't Chris cover that about you can become angry but still use moral character, you still behave in a moral way when you're angry. You can still you can become angry, but you don't have to lash out, you don't have to disrespect somebody, you don't have to be out of control, do you? Hello? When you're angry, do you have to be unrestrained and completely out of control? No, that's not angry. That's called fury. That's called rage. That's not anger. So let's be clear about that. Let's not get them mixed up. So mad, remember, it means completely unrestrained by reason and judgment, unable to think in a clear, sensible way, driven mad. Okay? Driven mad. Incapable of being explained or accounted for, like a mad decision, or what some people would call crazy. But now look at the third definition. Very important. Mad also means informally. Now that word informal means here's a popular or an unofficial definition of the word mad. In other words, it's not correct. It's just popular because people say it. Intensely angry or displeased. Intensely angry or displeased. The third definition for the word mad means a fit or mood or bad temper, anger or fury. Okay? Anger or fury. Let's go to the next slide, because we want to look at the word fury. And this is the definition that's actually found in the Peaceful Solution. Remember, in fact, you can turn back to page, let me give you a page number here. The different many faces of anger on page 59. Let's go ahead and turn there while we're looking at this visual, because it gives the exact same definition for fury. It means, in the book it says, a person's violent temper, intense, disordered, and often destructive rage. Question, is that just becoming angry? Hello? Yes or no? No, that's out of control anger. Remember, you can become angry and still be in control. Okay? You can still be in control if you're angry, but when you're out of control, right? And you're not controlling your thoughts, the emotion of anger, if you're not controlling it, it can turn to rage and fury or wrath, etc. Now, in Merriam-Webster, it says intense, disordered, and often destructive rage, like putting your fist through the wall. Okay? Do you have to put your fist through the wall when you're angry? No, you don't. Again, you can become angry and not use your fists at all, or not use your mouth as a fist? What about throwing that brick through the window? Do you have to do that when you're angry? No, you don't have to. That's called fury or rage, outrage or rage. It's the other definition of fury is extreme fierceness or violence. And again, you don't have to become violent when you're angry. You can actually sit there very calmly and explain to somebody why you're angry. Remember what we talked about? You can use I language, like, I feel angry right now about what you said, and I'm asking you that you don't do that anymore, or don't say that anymore. Right? You can actually behave morally even if you feel angry. Okay? Remember, anger is a normal emotion that all of us will feel from time to time. Let's go back to page, let's see, page 57. We got to really remind ourselves, because we're going over the word mad. We got to show the difference between mad and angry. In the second paragraph on page 57, it says, anger is a normal emotion that we all experience at times. Okay, underline that. It's normal. It's a normal emotion. It's something that we are born with. We have emotions that we're born with. It's a negative emotion. But remember, what did we learn about negative emotions? Go back to page 31. What did we learn about negative emotions? You know, remember jealousy, hatred, or not hatred, but rage, anger. These are all negative emotions. But notice what it says here. Generally speaking, emotions can be either negative or positive. Uncontrolled negative emotions are hurtful. Uncontrolled. Remember, the word mad implied that someone is out of control, okay? But if you control that negative emotion, that anger, if you control it properly, it doesn't have to go that way, okay? You can deal with it in a positive way. Okay, so let's look again at, no, let's just continue to go, let's continue to go forward. Here's another definition of mad, okay? You all remember Mad Magazine, I'm sure. Another term for mad is mutual assured destruction. You know, you can actually, you know, and this is a term that was coined in 1962, and basically what it's saying is, if you launch your nuclear weapons against our country, you die next. Both of us are going to die. So we're both mutually assured to be destroyed. Okay? That's called mad because that's insane. That's insanity. And actually, if you read the man that came up with this, his name was Donald Brennan. He coined that term in 1962. And it says, Brennan came up with this acronym, ironically spelling out the word mad, to argue that holding weapons capable of destroying society was irrational. In other words, a rational mind wouldn't do such a thing. So that means the person's mad. They're insane for even having these weapons. That's the proper use of the word mad, not angry. Angry and mad is not the same thing. Okay, so let's go back to what Susie was telling her friend. Or what Susie, let's see what page that was. 95. Okay, 95. Back to page 95. Susie said that she was mad, that she makes me so mad, but her friend pointed out, it sounds like that you're really angry. You know what she actually did there? She actually taught her friend the difference between mad and angry. She gave her the proper feeling that she was feeling, because mad's not a feeling. If you look in the feelings and negative emotions, do you see mad? Is it listed? No, it's not, because it's not an emotion. Mad is not an emotion. Okay? So don't get them mixed up. Okay? So when you read this, I know I used to read this when I was first reading the Peaceful Solution. I thought, well, she did say she was mad. Isn't mad and angry the same thing? Well, no, it's not. So now you know, right? So make sure that you note that, the definition of the word mad, so you don't get them mixed up in the future. And so your students will know the difference. Okay, so let's look at the second one. It says, do not interrupt or change the topic of a conversation until you're sure that the other person has finished speaking. Remember, these are tips for active listening. Don't interrupt or change the topic. If you've ever really wanted to talk about something, then you are aware of how great it feels to have someone listen to you. People can readily tell when someone wants to hear what they have to say. For example, you start telling your brother about a funny incident that occurred at school. And right in the middle of your story, he jumps in and starts telling you about his day at school. Interrupting someone when they are speaking sends a clear message that you are not interested in what they have to say, but what you want to say. That's called what? Being selfish? Selfish? You're seeking your own self or yourself, you just want, you're only cared about what you think or feel, but not about what the other person's thinking or feeling. I remember one time, and actually teaches in the Peaceful Solution that in other books, that if your child comes home from school and they're all excited about something, you shouldn't just downplay their excitement. And like your child's telling you, hey, I got an A on my reading test today, and you're like, hey, where's that remote control at? And it's like you didn't even hear what they just said. You didn't even share in their excitement. They're wanting you to share in their excitement. And I remember one time I called a really wise man and I told him, man, I just found out this certain thing, and I just read about this thing in the newspaper or whatever. And he's like, really? Wow, that's interesting. Send me the article, right? And a couple weeks later, I get a tape of a speech that he gave like 2 months ago, and he was already talking about it. And I thought I found it. But you know what? He did what he said that you should do. Share in their excitement. Even if you already know it, just share in their excitement. Pretend you don't know about it, right? And share in if you don't share in their excitement, they're not going to want to share their excitement with you. They'll go try and find somebody else to share it with. So it's just a tip for parents and everybody. So it says, control your desire to want to speak or give advice. This really requires self-control because everyone wants to be heard. Control your desire, or your urge, or your want or need to speak. Okay? And it does require self-control because, the tendency is to want to speak more than listen. But we've got to practice the listening. The listening is more important because, how many times, I'll give you an example. How many times have somebody talking to you and they start telling you something and they only get about halfway through, and then you jump in and you start saying, yeah, but, and they're like, yeah, but you didn't hear everything I said. I was getting ready to tell you about that. You didn't let me finish, right? We have to let people complete their thoughts that they're having. We need to let them complete the thoughts and control our desire to want to interject. And it's really hard because all we see, if you notice in the media, on TV, especially on talk shows, on news programs and talk shows, they invite a guest on and they start asking them questions, and they cut them off. Their guest will start answering a question and they don't like the response they're getting, and they'll cut them off, or they'll start ridiculing them for what they're saying or whatever. And it's like, man, you asked me the question. Can I just give you the answer? So there's a lot of bad examples on communication in the media. That's the problem. We see people getting cut off, rudely interrupted. We see their opinions, their ideas are not, readily accepted, or they don't fit the narrative, or they're not fitting the political agenda, so somebody cuts them off and they don't let them speak. We see that now in social media with Twitter, Facebook, and other social media, where they're actually deplatforming people that don't say what they want them to say, okay? And that's dangerous. In America, we do have, freedom of speech. Now, you know, we have a limitation on, we should have a limitation on speech in our mind in the peaceful solution, that we should never use speech to hurt people, right? Our speech should be to build one another up. Our speech should be to teach people, to educate them, to help them become better people, to inform them, to educate them about things, but not to tear down, not to destroy, not to threaten and intimidate and etc. It shouldn't be for that, okay? But there's some people that still haven't learned the peaceful solution. So you're always going to have that, okay, until everyone learns the proper way to communicate with self-control. Can you show the next visual? Found a next visual, please. I found a little, you know, this is another way of putting it about effective or active listening. It says effective listening is more than simply avoiding the bad habit of interrupting others while they're speaking or finishing their sentences. It's being content to listen to the entire thought of someone rather than waiting impatiently for your chance to respond. You know, and that takes, again, it takes self-control to sit there and, you know, just let them get their thoughts across and care about what they think, you know. Show the same care and consideration for them that you want shown for when you're trying to express your thoughts, is basically what it's saying, okay? So then somebody, you're sharing, you're conversing with somebody, right? And then they cut you off in the middle of your conversation, right? And they start talking, and then you try to answer back, and here's what they tell you. Show the next slide. Yeah. It's really rude to talk while I'm interrupting you. Right? It's really rude to talk while I'm interrupting you. What does that turn into? Yeah, it turns into an argument. It turns into it escalates, right? So if somebody is interrupting you, when, you know, there's a nice way of telling them, you know, hey, please don't interrupt me, or could you let me finish, please? Can you let me finish what I'm saying, and then I'll let you speak, right? There's a polite way of letting them know to let you finish, you know, what you're saying. But the person that's interrupting, you know, sometimes they'll take the defensive and say, well, you're interrupting me now, you know. Well, what are you going to do? Obviously, they haven't taken the peaceful solution course yet, right? So what are you going to do, fight with them? We can't resort to that. We gotta remember that not everyone's learning these active listening tips. They're not learning about communication. They're not even learning about self-control. Who's teaching them self-control? Hollywood? Is Hollywood teaching them self-control? You know, are they telling them, you know, to stop and think, weigh out their decisions and make the right decision that doesn't bring harm to anybody? No, that's not what I've seen. That's not coming forth from Hollywood. That's not coming forth from any of the media, from what I've seen. So let's look at the third active listening tip. It says, when you are actively listening, use an appropriate amount of eye contact. In other words, don't stare at someone to the point where they feel uncomfortable, like this following visual. Show the next visual. Yeah, there you go. You know, don't use appropriate eye contact. Don't stare at someone like that, right? You might make them nervous. You know, they might not feel very comfortable if you give them that Manson stare, as they used to call it, right? It says, on the other hand, don't avoid making eye contact altogether. Remember, your eye contact and facial expressions show the speaker you are paying attention. Have you ever, well, let me show you what appropriate eye contact, by the way, those are eye contacts. So make sure when you tell your students about eye contacts, make sure that or eye contact, you're not talking about those lenses you put in your eyes, you're talking about, you know, looking at someone. Hey, remember, you got to effectively communicate. You got to define things, right? Okay? No joke. They might be willing and able to receive the information, but you might not convey it properly. You got to make sure people understand what you're talking about, right? I'm trying to be humorous a little bit, but eye contact. Here's appropriate eye contact. Show the next slide. You know, this is appropriate eye contact in a meeting. The guy's not sitting there staring at the other person. He's just making an appropriate amount of eye contact. This student there, she's raising her hand. She's very pleasant. She's making eye contact with her teacher. She's sitting up straight in class. Looks like she's got her book in her hand, ready to learn. That's appropriate. That's the appropriate way, you know. Remember, because your eye contact and your facial expressions show the speaker that you're paying attention. Okay? And it looks like she's paying attention, right? Looks like this other person's paying attention in their conversation. That's the appropriate amount of eye contact and the appropriate way to look. Okay, it says, have you ever tried to explain something to someone and they gave you a blank look? You just knew they didn't listen to a word you just said, like the following graphic. That blank stare. Like, what? They weren't listening to anything you just said, right? Have you ever had someone look at you like that? Have you ever watched Conan? Okay, never mind. I'm not trying to put Conan down. Okay. All right, so let's look on page 96. I really need to start putting a laugh light up there, man, because sometimes I have to let you know I'm just trying to be humorous a little bit and keep it light. Okay, so on page 96, we're going to look at we're going to do an exercise you can do with your students. And it says, read the following statements and identify the correct feeling by circling the best answer. And on the line below, write an appropriate active listening response. So we're looking at active listening responses that we can give. So someone comes in and they say, even though I studied hard, I still failed another math test. Okay. So an active listening response, first of all, you've got to decide, well, remember, use empathy. How would you feel if you failed another math test and you wanted to pass your math test? Well, you'd probably feel frustrated. You'd probably feel disappointed. Would you feel joyful? No, so we can X that one out, right? So which two should we circle? Well, frustrated and disappointed. So your active listening response could be, it sounds like you're really frustrated and disappointed that you failed your math test. Okay? All right, so that was the example. So number one says, my sister always ignores me when her friends come over. Well, what do you think she's feeling in this case? Well, she's probably feeling rejected, not accepted, right? She probably feels angry. And do you think she feels afraid? Doesn't match, right? Okay. So you tell her your active listening response, since you now identified what she's feeling, you can respond with something like, remember the reflective response, you're reflecting back to her what you think she's feeling. You can say, you must feel left out when her friends come over. And she'll probably say, yeah, I do. I'd really like to be hanging out with them, right? And she'll probably open up some more to you because you just showed her that you cared enough to consider not only what she said, but what she's feeling, that you understand the feeling that she feels. Now this one I don't understand at all, because I could eat peanut butter and jelly every day. I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But someone might say, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches is for lunch again? So what do you think they feel? Well, they probably feel disappointed. They probably feel disgusted. Do you think they sound pleased? Because they just told you, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches again? So you could say, you sure sound disappointed. You must be disgusted with those sandwiches. Right? And they'll say, yeah, I wanted tomato soup today. You know, tired of these cold sandwiches. And they probably, I don't know about you, but I like tomato soup. Okay, number 3. I can't wait to ride my bike to the park. How do they sound? Excited. They sound glad. Did they sound upset? No. So your active listening response, remember you're reflecting back to them what you think they feel because you're using empathy. You can say, man, you really sound excited. You must be glad you're going to the park. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm sure any child, if you responded that way to them, if they were excited, they would be glad that you feel that excitement too for them. Even though you might not even feel it, right? You can just at least share in that excitement that they're having. And I'm sure that'll go a long way with most people when you do. How about this? I can't believe my wallet has not been turned into the lost and found. Do you think they're jealous because of that? Anxious? Disappointed? Yeah. So you could say, you must be really anxious about your missing wallet. I'll bet you're disappointed no one's turned it in yet. Okay? That's an active listening response. How about this? You never listen to me. Do they sound sad? Euphoric? Discouraged? Yeah, discouraged. So you can say, you sound really sad and discouraged. All right, it's page 97. You always choose him first. What do you think they're feeling? Jealous? Pleased? Or nervous? They're jealous. Yeah, they're jealous. They're feeling jealousy. Remember, what is jealous? Let's go back and read jealous again, because I want to make sure we understand what jealousy is. On page 33, jealousy means people experience the emotion of jealousy for many reasons, but one thing is certain, jealousy that is left uncontrolled can be a dangerous emotion. So the person might be jealous that, you know, this other person's always picked because they might think that you think he's better than me. You know, he's a better player than I am, so you're picking him. Why do you always pick him first? Well, we all experience that from time to time, but if we control it properly and we don't let it get out of hand, right? It's a negative emotion. Remember, uncontrolled negative emotions are the problem, okay? It says, so you can say, it sounds as if that makes you feel jealous, right? How about this one? The whole class laughed at me. Do you think they feel embarrassed, joyful, or satisfied? Embarrassed, right? Because the whole class laughed. How would you feel? How would you feel if the whole class laughed at you? You'd be embarrassed, right? So you just reflect back to them, you know, what you feel, what you know that they must feel. You must have felt embarrassed. I've had it with you. Do you think they feel contented? Pleased? Or frustrated? No, they're frustrated, right? They're frustrated, okay? Frustration, is that a primary or a secondary emotion? Can't hear you. It's primary. It's primary emotion, right? It can lead to anger. Frustration can lead to anger, right? But it doesn't have to. But when they say, I've had it with you, you can say, man, you seem frustrated. You know, is there something I did or just something I can do? I'm sorry, you know, is there something I've done or can I do something to make it better? Number 9, after school, I get to go shopping with my mother. Do you think they're excited? Do they feel anticipation? You know, like looking forward to something? Do you think they feel sad that they get to go shopping with their mother after school? Of course, you know, I don't know, when I was young, when I was growing up, when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, we didn't get to go shopping. You know, my mom ordered my peg leg pants off of Montgomery Ward catalog, so I was kind of sad because I didn't like them kind of pants. I didn't like corduroy pants that were real tight on my ankles, peg legs or whatever they called them. So yeah, it could be sad for me if my mother went shopping for my clothes, but usually, you know, if you get to go shopping for clothes, you're excited, right? And hey, nothing against my mom. She did the best job she could with the clothing. With 6 children trying to deal with clothing, I'm sure it was pretty tough. Okay, so number 10, it says, I thought you were my friend. How do you think they sound? How do you think they feel? Hurt? Disappointed? Cheerful? Or hurt and disappointed? Okay, so you can tell them, you sound really disappointed and hurt. Remember, that's active listening skills that'll go a long way with people, because you're not just listening with your ears, you're listening with your eyes because you're looking at their facial expressions. You're listening to their tone of voice. You're watching their body language. And you're listening with your heart because you're thinking, well, how would I feel if I was in their situation? If I was the one saying this, or, well, how would I feel? Put yourself in their shoes. Okay, so look on page 98. It says, you now know the difference of choosing your words, or the importance of choosing your words carefully and listening actively before giving a response. Next, you will learn about the effects of poor communication on our ability to interact in a positive way. Now, here's a quick reminder. A conflict means a problem or disagreement between people. A problem or disagreement between people. Is a conflict a war? No. It can lead to war. A conflict is just a problem or disagreement. Okay? It doesn't have to be. Remember, conflicts are not excuses for certain things. Let's go back to page 63 about that word conflict. Page 63. And you need to write in your book, you should reference page 63 there so you can remember. Page 63, where it says work it out, don't fight it out, in the middle of the first paragraph, it says conflicts are not excuses to become angry. Conflicts are simply disagreements between people with different opinions, needs, and wants. So conflicts don't have to lead to wars, to uncontrolled anger, because really, if you think about it, getting angry is not going to war, Now, if you don't control your anger, it can lead to fury and wrath and rage, and that is war. That's war, okay? That's a war. Because nobody's using self-control in a war. You can't claim that you're using self-control in a war, because self-control is actually saying that neither party is using self-control. So remember, conflicts are simply disagreements, okay? Go back to page 98. A conflict can be as simple as, I want spaghetti tonight, but my son wants hamburgers. So I got to go get a machete and chop his head off because he wants hamburgers and I want spaghetti, right? We got to do that? Do we have to sit there and argue about it back and forth? We have to get angry at each other and start using foul language with one another and stuff because we have a disagreement? Really? It has to lead to that? Doesn't have to. We can work things out, not fight it out, okay, as we learned in the last chapter. So on the next part, it says, let's go show the next visual. I want you to see this visually. Here's what it all boils down to. Communication and interaction that lacks self-control will lead to, notice will, no ifs, ands, buts about it, disrespect, loss of friendships, hatred, violence, and aggression. Let me repeat that. Communication and interaction that lacks self-control will lead to. Circle that word will, because there's no getting around it. This is what it's going to lead to if we don't practice this self-control, the ability to stop, think, weigh out our options, and proceed with the right choice. If we don't do the right choice of words in this case, or the right choice to communicate what we're thinking and feeling, we have to stop and think about it before we say it, okay? Because if we don't, and we don't use proper speech, proper body language, proper tone of voice, etc., or even proper facial expressions. If we don't stop and think about how we're doing these things, this is what it leads to. It does not lead to peace. Okay? So now we're going to learn about, the effects of poor communication on our ability to interact in a positive way. So let's turn first back to LP4D, and let's look at step 7. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Now remember, on step 6, it doesn't show page 98, does it? It says, just says to complete the exercises on 96 and 97. It doesn't mention 98, but you see 98's there, so that means you have to do 98 before you go to the next step, because the next step starts on 99. You see that? So you have to just know automatically that that's what you need to do. So it says, explain to students that as unique individuals with our own likes and dislikes, we will experience some conflicts with people, such as our friends and those in authority. This is one reason why self-control is needed when we communicate with others. Have students read the sections entitled Poor Communication Can Lead to Disrespect and Conflicts in Authority, found on page 99 through 103. Have them do the respective exercises. Stress that self-control is needed for respectful communication. And in situations where it involves an authority figure taking advantage of their position, they should continue to use self-control to interact as respectfully as possible. However, they should inform a caring adult as soon as possible so that the situation can be dealt with appropriately. And I won't get that far tonight, but we will cover page 99. So let's go over to page 99 and look at poor communication can lead to disrespect. It says, everyone experiences conflicts or disagreements. You probably had one today in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I know I have, okay? Conflicts can occur between best friends, members of the same family, and even complete strangers. In fact, conflicts can occur anytime you interact, okay? It can occur at any time. So we should walk around with a chip on our shoulder, right? Because, hey, the conflict can occur at any time. No. Just beware that conflicts can occur. We all have different likes, dislikes, and different moods. What are different likes and dislikes called? Yeah, it's called personality. We all have different personalities. Hey, you might not like the way I look. You might not like the way my hair. You might not like my hairstyle, or my funny glasses, or my tone of my the way I speak, or the way I look, or whatever. That's fine. You don't have to. But we still need to respect one another and treat each other as human beings, because that's character, right? That shows our character. We really need to get past the surface issues, like skin color. Remember, we went over that in the last book in the acceptance unit. We need to get past those superficial things and remember that we're all the same under the skin. We all have feelings. We all have wants and desires. We all want to live in peace, safety, and security. We don't want to be stolen from. We don't want to be lied to. We don't want to be taken advantage of. Okay? We all want those things, okay? And we all have our different likes and dislikes, and that's fine. That's what makes the world interesting. What makes each person tick is varied and complex. Because of this, no two people are going to see eye to eye all the time, and that's okay. Hey, notice that. We don't have to have the same ideas and opinions, okay? It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It says, for example, two brothers can disagree on what color to paint their room. Or two friends can disagree on what to do for an activity. One might want to bake cookies and the other wants to ride bikes. However, conflicts or disagreements should never be an excuse to be rude or disrespectful. So let's underline that. Conflicts or disagreements should never be an excuse to be rude or disrespectful. Remember, we just read on page 63, conflicts are not an excuse to become angry. It's not an excuse. It just means we have different needs and wants and opinions. Even though we are all unique individuals with various opinions and values, we can learn to coexist peacefully. That means we can learn to exist without bringing harm to one another with words or any other way, just because we have different opinions, different religions, different skin color, etc., different culture, or whatever. The key is to treat others respectfully even when we disagree. Learning how to communicate our opinions, needs, and feelings effectively will help us avoid conflicts that lead to disrespect, hurt feelings, and loss of friendships. Okay, so exercising self-control and speaking and listening to others can help us resolve many conflicts peacefully. Communication that lacks self-control has the potential to turn into verbal and physical abuse. And I think, that was probably the basis of, the League of Nations after World War, I think it was World War II, the League of Nations, and then the United Nations. They were a platform for leaders to get together and share ideas and speak to one another and try to work things out verbally, right, orally, where they could get up and speak and they could try to resolve their conflicts without resorting to war. The problem is, and that's a noble idea. There's nothing wrong with that idea. The problem is some of the leaders haven't been taught, and it's not their fault they haven't been taught. We should have taught them, okay? They should have been taught proper communication skills, because I've seen speeches given in the UN and other meetings of world leaders where threats are made, very disparaging, disrespectful remarks are made. I remember one in particular in probably around 2004 where one president, the president of, I think it was Venezuela, I think the president of Venezuela came up there and said, I smell sulfur. The devil was here yesterday. He was talking about the U.S. president that had spoke the day before. These kind of words, this kind of communication, it doesn't result in peace. Okay, we just read communication and interaction that lacks self-control leads to disrespect, loss of friendships, hatred, violence, and aggression. Because remember, what do all wars begin with? Well, yeah, everything starts with a thought, right? But words, threats, intimidation, etc., name calling, teasing, bullying, those kind of things come from the mouth. They come out of people's speech. Okay, so it says, exercising self-control and speaking and listening to others can help us resolve many conflicts peacefully. Communication that lacks self-control has the potential to turn into verbal and physical abuse. Because remember, usually physical abuse is preceded by verbal abuse. Usually it starts with the name calling, the teasing, the bullying with the mouth, and then it leads to hitting with the fist or other forms of abuse, physical abuse. But that's why we got to stop it at the root. We got to stop it at the verbal level. We've got to not go there with our mouth, because it'll lead to other things later. And remember, we got to learn to control our thoughts, because everything starts with a thought. I thought I heard somebody say thoughts. Yes, everything starts with thoughts. We've got to get our thoughts under control. And really what we need to do is we need to gear our thoughts, or we need to our thoughts need to be, what does the peaceful solution say about this situation? Okay? And that takes self-control to think about that, because a lot of times we just want to say or do what we want to say or do. Whatever feels great at the time, whatever makes us feel satisfied that we got that word in, that we let that person know how we really feel. But that's not practicing self-control. What we should be thinking is, okay, how does the peaceful solution say to handle this? And even if you have to go back in your manual and remind yourself and look to see what it says. I had to do that today about a certain situation. I had to go back and look and see, okay, how does it say you can do this without, accusing, without, making someone feel that, you're making an accusation against them. How can I say it without doing that, right? Okay, so look at the bottom. It says, look at the next visual too, by the way. It says, if you change the way you look at conflicts, you'll be better able to handle them in a positive way. Conflicts are not necessarily bad. Look at every conflict as a learning experience, an opportunity for you to test your self-control, communication skills, and build your positive character traits. In other words, I don't remember which teacher it was, but they did mention that, you should look at situations as an opportunity, as a friend, that, hey, look, this is an opportunity for me to practice self-control or forgiveness or whatever positive character trait you need to practice in that situation. It's not a bad thing. You got to have people, you have to have that person that's out of control in order to see how you're going to react. If you're really, in order to test you to see, am I really getting the lessons in the peaceful solution, or am I just hearing them but not really applying them? Okay, so we got to have, I think it was David where he talked about the car battery. You got to have the positive and the negative post to start the car, right? So you got to have the negative has to be there to see if we're going to practice the positive. If we're going to, teach through our example that person how to actually handle a situation properly. Because really, you're being a teacher in that situation, how you handle it, how you respond. Remember, we can't control, you remember what it says? We can't control the way people act or how they behave, but we can only control what? How we respond to how they're behaving, what they're saying or what they're doing. We can only control that, okay? But we've got to have people to test us, right? And that doesn't mean we go around doing it purposely. None of us are going around trying to push each other's buttons just to see, hey, is he going to practice a peaceful solution? Let me see what he does. Nobody's doing that, hopefully, right? What we should remember is, just like when a teacher teaches us math or science or reading and they give us a test at the end of the week, right? We have to be tested with day-to-day occurrences, daily interactions with one another, daily communications with one another. We have to be tested to see, are we going to apply what we learn? Okay? And sometimes it could be that out-of-control person. Sometimes it could just be through casual conversation. Are we going to allow that person to finish what they're saying? Or are we going to speak out of turn and interrupt that person? Remember, we got to practice these things that we're learning. We've got to practice applying self-control to our interaction and communication, okay? So I think that's where we're going to stop tonight. We don't have any more time. What page was that? Is that 99? I made the mistake of turning my page before. Okay, it was page, 99? Thank you. Yeah, page 99. The next teacher, Katan, will pick up on page 99, okay? And the next class will be on 5/18 at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's been wonderful being able to meet with you today, and we hope to see you next time, okay? Keep practicing the peaceful solution.